All right. Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to your weekly broadcast of Midweek with Church Planners, and this is the Wives Edition. So if you've been watching us every week, you have seen my husband, Rick Young, from Watermark Church in Columbus, Jason Williams at Church in the Wild, and Aaron Taylor, and they've had a special guest every week. But this week, we have taken over, and we have two special guests. So I'm going to start off by introducing everybody, and we just want this to be an encouragement to you. We know that during this time, we all face different challenges. We're all in different phases of life, and so we just wanted to have a discussion in the morning to see how we can encourage you this morning. So this morning, we have with us Sam Williams, and her husband is Jason, and they're at Church in the Wild. And then we have Liz Taylor from Living Hope Church, and her husband is Aaron. And then we have two special guests this morning from NAMB. And I just have to say, NAMB has been such a blessing to us church planters. We're all part of Sun Network, specifically Sun Columbus, us three wives here. And it has just been amazing what you guys have done to encourage us and to support us. So we are very grateful for that. So first of all, we have Cathy Linton, and she is the Director of Planner Spouse Development. And then Rivers Parton is new at NAMB. She's been a fellow planner's wife with us, and now she has come on as the spouse development specialist. And she's actually over the Midwest, so she's kind of our direct in line here. So I just want to welcome you all and thank you for being a part of the program this morning. And I just thought, since we're new, since everybody's used to hearing the voice, we would just go around and tell a little bit about our families and kind of where we're at in this church planning phase and what's going on. So why don't we go ahead and start with you, Sam? We'll start with the planners' wives. Making you go first.
Caught me off the spot. I'm Samantha Williams, Sam, and you really caught me on the spot. And I'm a church planner wife. My husband is Jason Williams, and we planted Church in the Wild in Westerville, Ohio. And we are a year, almost 2 years this September. Wow. We started on Saturdays, and then we moved to Sundays September 23rd, almost 2 years ago. We have a little girl. Her name is Isla Kay, and she's our little rainbow baby. And she turned 3 in January. Sorry, quarantine has me like guessing what day it is and who I am. Yeah. Here we are. But yeah, that's a little bit about us. We also have a bulldog named Cromwell. So that's us.
Thanks. Very good. All right. How about you, Liz?
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Taylor, which is great. People always remember my name. Well, not everyone. Younger people sometimes are like, I don't know. But yeah, I'm a part of Living Hope Church Columbus. We're in Powell, Ohio, and we're about 2.5 years old. I have 2 daughters at home, an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. So right now in our home, we're doing some 2nd grade homeschooling and then also some preschool, I need you all the time kind of situation. So that's where we're at right now.
Awesome. Well, those guys are definitely a little bit farther along in their church planning journey. We launched January 12th. We're 6 weeks in, and then this pandemic happened. So this has been a little crazy for our family. So we just laugh, talk about, now we got to relaunch since we just launched. Now we're going to have to kind of start over again. But I have 2 kids at home. My son is 18. He's a senior this year. So this has been crazy for him with all of the, not getting to do your last things. But I have enjoyed having him home because he works all the time and he plays sports. So I was just telling Cathy before this, not often do you have an 18-year-old boy that will watch movies with his mom and play cards all the time with her. So that's been fun. And then our daughter is a music student out at California Baptist University. So she came home. So as some moms, it's kind of crazy, you guys doing school at home and trying to entertain toddlers during this. I'm kind of loving my time with my big kids because I know that my time is limited with them. So, but again, hilarious dynamic at our house. Delaney's a music major. So she's been practicing the piano 2 and 3 hours a day. And recording all of her tests, playing percussion and all that kind of stuff. So that's been kind of comical, us all trying to coordinate around each other, practicing and Rick Zoom calls and all that. So that's a little bit about me. Rivers, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, sure. My name's Rivers, like you said, and my husband Dave and I have been married for 22 years, and we have 4 kids. Joy is 13, Lydia is 11, Melody is 9, and Jackson just turned 8 during the pandemic, and he said it was his best birthday of his whole life. So we decided that birthday parties we don't have to do those anymore. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's mostly because we had pancakes for breakfast and waffles for dinner. I mean, 8-year-old boys are pretty easy to please, which is great.
Their standards are pretty low.
That's right. Yeah, so that's my family. We live in Kansas City on the Kansas side, and planted 3. Our plant just turned 3 years old in November. So yeah, church planted here in the suburbs of Kansas City. And that's who I am. And I serve on the spouse development team with Cathy. And I also started that during the pandemic. So no, at the beginning of April, really right before everything got really locked down. So
right. I was like, when I got the word that you were starting doing that, and then I realized how soon it was after the pandemic, I'm like, oh, she's just like our church, just starting out. Now has to like reinvent everything that you do. So that's awesome. Well, Cathy, we're excited that you're here too. Cathy is one of my heroes. I've gone to many conferences and heard her speak. And so when I found out coming on working with the spouses, I was going to get to work with you, I was really excited about that. So it's an honor to have you here today.
Well, it's great to be here. I have worked for NAMB. It'll be 9 years in June. And the last 4 years, I asked for a change in my role about 4 years ago, that I would focus only on planner spouses. And it really opened up the door for us to really start serving the spouses in a manner which they deserved. And so I lead the spouse development team, and we have 2 full-time employees besides myself, and then a contract worker. And the mission of the spouse development team is to provide care and create community for planting wives and help deliver coaching and training to them across the SEND network. So that's what we're attempting to do. We have the opportunity to meet amazing women in this role, and the stories of women and their contributions to the kingdom of God through church planting is just amazing. We get a front row seat to get to see the sacrifices that are made, the commitment to their neighborhoods and their communities, and their willingness to be bold messengers of the gospel is really, really amazing. I grew up in Missouri. I've been married to 2 preachers. So if you think, if I ever get out of this, I'm never going back to it, you just might. But anyway, I got married at 19 and was married to an amazing man, and we ministered in Colorado and in Texas. And in 2002, he pastored a church in downtown Denver. He was killed in a car accident. So I became a widow at age 45, and my life just started taking this trajectory that I did not want, nor would have ever foreseen. But I learned some amazing things about the sufficiency of God and the hope that he gives us through Jesus Christ. It was a powerful time of grief, but also transformation. So after I lived alone and did ministry alone for 7 years, I remarried another preacher. That's where that other preacher comes in. So he also lost his wife in a car accident. So I moved to Mobile, Alabama about 10 and a half years ago, which was the biggest cultural shock of my life, because I never lived in the Deep South. So that's a whole nother topic in itself. But, and God has just put our lives together and our grief and our losses, and he is building and creating, just like we started over, we're building a new marriage, and our love and our understanding for each other is just growing. And it's been a really powerful thing. It hasn't always been easy for Ed and I, either one separately or together, but seeing God at work and what he does to build your life and create one, this has been really encouraging. That's how I got here.
Awesome. So if you need any marriage advice, no, I'm kidding.
Listen, I want to show you this book I'm reading right here. On that note, now I can't send this book out because I think it's so. Has anybody ever heard of Paula Reinhardt by any chance? She's a counselor. She's the best writer you've never, ever, ever heard of. And she's written this book, What's He Really Thinking? And it's really understanding men. And she draws all this truth mostly from counseling, and it's so politically incorrect. I'm just telling you, it'll never be a bestseller. It didn't go anywhere. It came out in 2009. But she's very respectful of both genders and just trying to talk about our differences. And this is a whole topic in itself. But at my age, like, one of the things I hope I can contribute to younger marriages and then uniquely being married to two different men and starting over the same practice of recreating another marriage together and building that thing. It's just given me eyes that I got married to Rick when I was 19 and this stuff was going on, but I was just too dumb to know. Do you know what I mean? And now I see. But this understanding our men is a really big category. And as soon as I get figured out, I'll tell you. Okay. This book has really been insightful, but sorry, I really chased a lot of rabbits in there.
No, that's good. And that's a good way to go in this conversation, because I know, like, for me, and we're all in different phases as far as like where our families are, but I know, one of the biggest challenges for me during this is just how to be an encouragement to Rick. Because like I said before, we had this big launch and then all this happened. And so, being a new church plant, we don't have a lot of the bells and whistles, all the equipment to, record awesome music and all that kind of stuff. So literally the first couple of weeks, and I know you guys can attest to this too, just like the scrambling of like trying to figure out how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? And, just to be able to encourage Rick when I'm discouraged, that's been a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I told Cathy this story already, but our plant meets at a school. And so Dave normally goes much earlier than I do. And then by the time I get there, it's about half set up. And then I'm running around to our kids ministry rooms and making sure people got there and all these things. And then it's almost like we high five right before he preaches. It's like we barely see each other, but we're doing live casting from our home. And he's again setting up and he's playing guitar and preaching. And I'm doing a little bit of a welcome and whatever. And about our third weekend, I for some reason, our ducks were a little more in a row, and I had already like got our kids a little bit settled. And I said, "Can I pray for you before we start?" And he was like, "Oh, would you?" Like, I was like, "Well, of course I would." Sorry, it was almost like sorry I haven't offered before. It's just been, but our normal Sunday mornings, we have some elders and some other people that always pray with him before our service. I'm never a part of that because I'm running around, making sure kids ministry stuff is okay. But that's been just one simple thing that I've been doing on Sunday mornings, just praying out loud for him, 5 minutes before our live stream starts or whatever. And it's just so simple, but it was like, of course I would. I just was making the kids, threatening the children before we started. That's why I did it already, like, sorry.
That's good. Mm-hmm.
I would say this, we have this conversation, on our team and understanding men in a different way at 63 than I did at 23 is they're down deep more than I realized when I was younger, that there's always this lurking insecurity with them and the struggle for adequacy. Mm-hmm. And not always, and this is not, we don't create formulas or sweeping generalizations, but when a man feels inadequate, he usually displays some anger or frustration. And then that's usually where the communication train comes off the tracks right there. Because when we perceive anger, it's, it usually is a toxic moment in communication. But understanding that would be their default setting inwardly and not always able to tell you that and express that. And so I just wrote a blog and we did a little podcast on when your husband needs emotional support. And one of the points of that, there were 6 things that we need to do. One of them was extend patience and understanding. And it's hard when you see your husband be frustrated and then maybe his anger spills over in a slightly inappropriate way. Maybe it's manifested toward you or a kid or something. Now, we're not talking about out of control anger, so I want to put parentheses around that, but give him some patience to work through some of those feelings that you understand. Because if we go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs someday, we want him to give us patience and understanding. Emotions are a feeling and they don't last very long, and we don't want ever to inflict emotional damage, do not get me wrong. But on the other hand, to trust that he's going to work through his emotions, we're going to give him a little patience and say, I know my emotions and I know I have to work through them. Thank you for respecting the process. And so I think trying to understand where his frustrations may be coming from and honoring him in that time, it's going to take the work of the Holy Spirit for us to do that well, but we can do it and we can serve him. And maybe we come back later and talk about the whole thing in a different way.
Yeah.
Liz, do you find that to be something that would, in your marriage, like trying to know how to communicate in moments like that is important?
Absolutely. I actually studied communication in college. So communication for me is like a big one. And honestly, I was thinking through, how do I encourage my husband? And it was kind of a hard question because I think sometimes in the season of life I'm in, I'm constantly in kid, thinking of my kids and that, they're kind of in that needy phase. And so it's really important for me to kind of shift my focus more often and prioritize his feelings. But one of the ways that I encourage him is I'm an intentional listener. And I make sure that when he's ready to talk and he wants to process through something, especially right now, because there's all this like pressure and this like, I have to be creative. I have to figure out, how to do church now because everything has changed and how to encourage my people. There's just so much going on in his world. So when he's ready to talk and wants to process through something, like I make sure that I like physically stop and I just listen to him and let him work through that. And it helps me too, because then I can kind of see better into, okay, what does he need? How is he feeling? How can I help him right now? So that's, again, something super simple, but it's just, and reality usually hits. And when I'm trying to listen, my kids are climbing on my head or, they're just mom. But I will usually just correct them, send them on their way, and then make sure I had that time just to like hear him and what's going on in his mind and just help him process is a big one for me.
It's really good.
I think for me, I've been really trying to, like, if I see something good, speak it, because Rick, the way he's preaching now, everything totally different when you're speaking to a camera, even just the way he's kind of structuring his messages and everything. And just like, hey, just saying, hey, your message was awesome today. I love this about it. Amazing job learning how to edit the videos. And, every week he's been getting better and better and better. And I think, we think our husbands are awesome and we love them, but sometimes we don't speak it. We keep it inside, and just to be that encouragement, because sometimes they're really not getting it. And we assume that other people are telling them those good things, or, if someone tells me something good about it, to make sure that I'm passing that along to him, especially because we're new and we don't have a big, church base. So we have a small group of relationships, but not a big. So just, that's just been, the Lord's just been really impressing it in my heart, where I just feel the Holy Spirit sometimes when I have a thought, like, speak it, tell Rick that. And I think it's really important during this time to do that.
That's good.
What about you, Sam? Do you have anything that's been sticking out to you, or different ways that you're encouraging Jason right now?
I'm just enjoying listening to you guys. I should have brought my notebook.
I'm taking notes.
Oh, good. Thank you, Wendy. Yes, I'm a very emotional person, which is why I don't speak. So I'm going to try to keep it together during this. Yes. So early on, we're still 2 years. Like when we first started, I was the same way. I felt like I was a chicken with my head cut off. We didn't have anybody for kids' church. We didn't have anybody for nursery. We combined the two, welcoming greeters, so on and so forth. And I just remember feeling like I was drowning. And when Jason and I did ministry together, in a previous church for 8.5 years. And I was so used to that format of me being like there for him. He would do an event and I would know to do the food and get the volunteers and set it up. And I knew exactly my role and what I was doing there. And we had a good ebb and flow. It also took us 7.5 years to get pregnant. So we were starting a church and we had a little one. And I just remember feeling like I was drowning. And I sought so much counsel and so much scripture reading and just in prayer, because I was so used to being so involved in ministry. And to sit back and hear him tell me that he needed a wife, and for me to be Isla's mother over ministry was super hard for me, if I'm being honest, just because my heart is ministry. I mean, I love my husband and he knows that. And I felt like I was supporting him because I was there with him, like side by side. Like anytime something was going on, I was there. We didn't have any kids at home. We had some girls, some sisters live with us for a little bit, but they were teenagers. And so they were right there with us because we were teens and young adults. Anyway, my point is that when he said that to me, I almost felt like, like I almost am crying now, but I was like, you don't want me to do ministry? Like, you don't need me in the ministry? We planted this church. And that was really hard for me, but through, I mean, just the Lord speaking to me during that time and putting people in my lives. And we've never had anything like this before, anything like NAMBs. We've never had support. We've never had other people to go to. We were always kind of told like anything that you were feeling that wasn't positive was to be kind of private. And I'm not a private person. I'm a very open book. So it's always hard for me. But stepping into NAMB and having the support and the resources, and it was just a whole new ball game. And the Lord really showed me that aspect, that cheerleader aspect that you guys were talking about being there for him. Because in the end, when this is all done and people will come and go, but Jason and I will always remain constant and the same. Obviously in the Lord, unless the Lord takes one of us. But it was important for me to realize that nobody can cheer him on like I can, and nobody can give him that support and love that he needs from me, his helpmate. And I think that really helped me to understand and see early on. And then the Lord just put people in place. I mean, to hear you, Rivers, say that you were running around and that you were like, of course I want to pray with you. It was like flashbacks. And now, even 2 years into it, just praying for the Lord to put people in place of kids ministry and all the things that he didn't want me involved in, but I needed to be because we didn't have anybody. And now I get to find him. Well, back when we had church in the beginning, before church, and pray with him and just hug him and give him a kiss. It was like I could see it on him, and I never realized the impact and how powerful that was for him. And he was like, yeah, like I'm going to do this. Like the Lord is going to speak through me. And, like I can do this from, earlier in the morning where he was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Why did I start a church? Just to see that role, I was like, okay, yeah, I get it.
Sam, I want to tell you something that happened to me. Rick was killed right before our 26th wedding anniversary. So something happened about year 21 or 22 in our marriage. He was teaching a sermon series on the book of Genesis in downtown church in Denver, Colorado. And he was going to talk about creation in Genesis chapter 3. It was very challenging, as you know, super secular. And so after he preached this message, the strongest Bible student at our church, he had a PhD in physics. He worked for Martin Marietta. He came up to me. He said, Rick got the science right. He got the Bible right. And he's the most respected man in the church. And he just so affirmed Rick's preaching. So Sunday night we got to bed, and I remember what Ralph had said to me. And I said, oh, this is what Ralph said about your message today. And Rick was kind of a low-key guy, was not prone to drama or anything, but he just rolled over on one elbow and he looked at me. He said to me, nobody's opinion about my sermons matter except yours. And he'd never said that before. And I was clueless at that point, and I'm just being totally honest, of how singularly my opinion stood out. And so I don't think men will, we were deep in our marriage before Rick said something enough that clearly communicated that to me. But I just think we don't get it, how valuable our voices are. And the smallest thing, which seems like, like if we thought those good things, like Wendy says, we need to say them. No, we don't need to say all the bad things we're thinking, but we need to say all the good things.
Sandwich approach, right? I think you
yeah,
talked about one
sandwich, yeah.
Not a different topic, but the sandwich. I know, and that is hard sometimes when you know that there's something that you do need to say, but just like praying for the right timing and making sure everyone's in a good place to receive it if you're going to share it.
I had to ask Jay, like, when's a good time to talk? Tuesday afternoons? Okay, that sounds good. And then I also had to like pray, like, Lord, show me if I'm just being like, like, oh, this, and that, or if you're trying to like show me something as a helpmate. And learn the difference.
Yeah, I know. And even like for us, like in our marriage, like I've learned, like we don't talk about serious things like money at night when we're both tired. Like we've just had to agree that like, and sometimes we even say, hey, tomorrow, could we set aside some time to talk about X, Y, Z or whatever? Just because I've learned the hard way that at night when we're both tired or, when he's just like come home from work or whatever, so it is a lot of time, and it's good to ask, because I remember having to ask Rick, like, when would be a good time for us to talk about, these things? And that is a smart question for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any other ways that they're encouraging their husband through this? Anyone? All right. Well, what are some challenges, maybe with your family, or just what are some challenges, Cathy and Rivers? I know you guys are probably hearing from other planners' wives. What would you say are some of the big challenges that you're facing right now, even just with your families or whatever?
You want to start, Cathy?
I'll let you. I'm talking too much. You go with the Rivers.
I like trying to make you start so we have time to think. No,
Right?
I'm kidding.
Okay, you need me to start? No,
I
can do this. Yeah,
I can start. I think we all just mentioned quite a lot of it. Is I think our planters are learning a lot. It's like getting shoved into the deep end of the wave pool. Everything changed like that for most of us. For those of us who meet in schools, like our school district has already told us, don't plan on meeting here until possibly like after the new year, So there's so many unknowns. And I think the pressure that our planting families are feeling is immense, and it's unprecedented, and there's no guidebook. There's not that there is for church planting anyway, but at least the people had some ideas before, and now it's like, what, So I think the pressure to reach the lost, to care for the hurting it's already there. Our planting families have a calling to do this, and then now everything they knew kind of got stripped away. And so I think that is that's immense pressure. And I think for a planting family, they're dealing with that, plus all their personal challenges of possibly income is lessened, their kids are grieving losses, they're grieving personal losses of vacations that were canceled, or birthday parties, graduations, So I think the pressure right now is immense, on so many different levels and areas.
Yeah, I know Rick and I were even talking the other day. I know he feels this intense pressure. You have all these people that are investing in you and your supporters. And for us, like, this is really putting us behind the game. We don't have all those strong relationships already formed. We're just beginning. So just that pressure of, people who moved up here with us to do this, and we have all these people investing money in us. And, that pressure is, real. And that's, just something that I know sometimes Rick, cannot let get a hold of him, overshadow what he's trying to do right now, for sure.
Yeah.
You know what, Wendy, I would say you mentioned fear, and I think one of the hardest things to be expressed in marriage, especially from men to women, is fear. But we can see the fear. And when Ed and I was doing that article on emotional support, and Ed and I were talking about how men don't want to share those things because he said, I don't want my fear to spark your fear. And so, let's be honest, when they express their fear, it makes us very fearful. And there's that tension of, my confidence can't be in him. My confidence has to be in God. And the only way I can healthily listen to my husband's emotions is do it with confidence in God, and being able to bear him sharing some hard things that you're like, I don't want to hear this. It's not helping me right now. We have to be women of faith and just hand that whole thing over to our Heavenly Father, and not rely on our husband's strength in every moment, or his confidence, or his plan for the next steps, because he's not feeling it all right now. He may have flashes of that, but to bear that is a very sacred thing. But it's also, it's going to take our roots going down deep in God, not in him, and trust him. The other thing I would say this, and I learned this in widowhood, that when you walk by faith and not by sight for me looked very scary. Do you know what I mean? The loss of income, future, everything. Do you know what I mean? So I could not keep my eyes on the deal. I had to walk by faith and not by sight. And what I recognized in that moment for me, that good circumstances had been propping up my faith, and I didn't even know it. And when the good circumstances were gone, it kind of exposed a little bit to where I've been trusting anyway. A regular paycheck from a church. Do you know what I mean? All those kind of things. And it took me back to walking by faith and not by sight. And that was a spiritual and emotional exercise combined together, is to take my fear and the uncertainty of the future. And you guys, the same in your plants. And I know, Wendy, your plant is fragile because it's brand new. Each of you have unique ways you would be fearful, but we have to walk by faith in this moment and trust the unseen hand of God right now. But I begin to see little things popping through the ground as a widow, and I could see these things, how God was working, and some of them were really small. And I would encourage all you planners' wives just to, your faith is really important right now. And it's okay if your faith feels very fragile. That is totally fine. We just have to have that grain of a mustard seed, and we just get up and we put our confidence and trust in God, and we don't look around us, because sight won't be good for us right now.
Yeah, that's really good. I think another area that's really difficult right now, or could be really difficult right now, is comparison. The amazing tool of technology that we have to be able to broadcast our services right now and all that. It's so wonderful. And it also is bringing a floodgate of us seeing what all of our peers are doing, or whatever. And so that's an area where we're seeing struggle in our planting families, is just, oh man, their service looked so good, and they had a drum and whatever, there's 1,000 ways we could compare and think, are we doing enough? Is it good enough? Does it have a slick enough look, or whatever it is? And back to how we can encourage, one thing that Dave and I have been doing is just reminding one another of our calling, just saying, God chose us for these people in this neighborhood, on this little living room from this live stream, and is going to use this for his glory, and to just walk by faith in that and trust him.
You know, one more thing that we do have to take by faith is that God is still planting seeds in people's lives. And we had a report from one of our planners' wives in Salt Lake City, and they were talking about, and it's not very sizable. The church plants in the Salt Lake City area are you know, it's a tough place, very tough place. But their online viewing is just going through the roof all of a sudden in big staggering numbers. I won't go into it, but the Mormons are looking. It's online. And so I just there's fruit that's going to come because of this. And we don't know what that is. I mean, I believe it here in the church where my husband's pastoring an existing church in the South. So I think we also do that by faith. We trust that God is planting some seeds that we can't see. And later on, we're going to hear some stories like this happened during COVID. Like when we all thought God was shut down, he was still working.
Right before this happened, one of Jason's mentors, Travis Davenport at Covenant Church, I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to get better with names. He said to Jay, and Jay came home and he was like an aha moment. And he basically said like, hey, you know, we're a small church right now, so pastor like a small church. And I feel like sometimes when we were church planning, we were like, I don't know, at least my perspective from him is like kind of, you know, what can we do better? What can we improve on? What can we grow on? And he basically said like, hey, you're a small church, love your people right now where they are, which was a small church. And that was so helpful during this time, because for us, it kind of like set us back and opened our eyes, I feel like, to obviously what was going to be happening, and loving our people as a small church and doing the small things. So like, love you. Sorry, my whole family goes to work, so everybody's leaving. My daughter woke up and my husband's taking her out, and he's taking everybody with him. My mom also moved in with us, so he's taking her. Anyway, he's a great man. But is that doing the small things? So obviously it was very devastating and crushing that we weren't able to meet as one body, just even seeing people, you know what I mean? Just like seeing their faces and giving them hugs and being there in person. And then we had one of our elders have 2 deaths within 2 weeks, his wife's nephew and then his wife's uncle, and just being there for them when they can't go to the funerals. It's just, sometimes it's overwhelming. But what I was saying, I'm a rabbit trail person too, with the little things is taking them flowers, taking them a card, just dropping it off, saying hi. We did that for one of our greeter families, and I love them to pieces. Their son is in college and plays in our worship band, and she was like, woo! She's one of my favorite people. She's like, this was the highlight, just seeing your face. And I feel like that's what it's about, and kind of encouraging my husband to not, what you were saying, Rivers, not focusing on like, oh, wow, look at their lights. Wow, how's their picture so clear? Or, you know, like, oh, our live stream crashed the other week. And I was like, as a wife, I was in full panic mode because I knew what the next 3 days were going to come with our live stream crashing on Sunday. And we pre-recorded and we were at home. So I like ran out in my Snuggie robe, if you guys know what that is. This is like a full hood and mittens and everything. And I was like, go live quickly. It was like right now in my pajamas. I was like, just go live. It's like, okay. So I'm like fixing his hair.
You let him borrow the
going
Snuggie?
for him.
Go live in the
He's like,
Snuggie?
I don't know what to say. I know. I love my Snuggie. I live in that thing. He's like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, yes, you do. Yes, you do. You just said it yesterday. You can do it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And so he went live in his PJs with his curly, cute hair going this way and that way. And like to him, he was just like, oh my word, that's the worst thing ever. But the messages that our people sent him of like, hey, I really appreciate, seeing that you care enough just to go live. Like he was like throwing off his shirt and throwing on another. And he was like, hey, good morning. Like sleep crust in his eyes. Oh my Lanta. Like I'm sitting back like, oh, this is bad. But up front, I'm like, yeah, this is good. I'm going to share this. I'm going to share this for you.
Neighbors are tuning in. We're not sure why, but they're all.
Yeah. I'm like, please turn in. Please tune in. Share this. I'm like texting people, hey, can you share a video? Share it. Can you share this? We went live on the personal page. It wasn't even the church's page. Like halfway through, he's like looking at me like, this is my page. I'm like, keep going. I'm going to send it to the church page. I don't know how to send it to the church page. But just that like encouragement. Like I was laying in bed with our daughter and I saw it crash and I was like, jumping out of bed because I knew what was going on in the other room. It was just like things like that I've learned from mentors, and even like hearing, like we went to dinner with Wendy and Jessica, excuse me, I forgot her last name, Crispy. And just hearing them and how important it is to be a cheerleader, because I feel like a lot of times I'm like, you're anointed. Like, this is a calling from God. You don't need me to cheer you on all the time. Like, why do you keep getting discouraged? He called you. What you think is that calling gone? Because if it's gone, we should be gone. Is it there? I don't know why I have to be such a cheerleader. But that's me. That's me. I don't like it when people are like, good job. I'm like, no. Yeah. It wasn't me. It was the Lord. Say good job to the Lord. But yeah, men are different, huh? So I'm trying to be more of that. And I can see it on his face. And then in return, what we get as a family from him is just, it's there. And I'm glad I'm learning it. I am baby step learning it, but I'm learning it. But yeah, and then just being there, treating it like it is. Like we're a church plant. We're a small church under 100 members. And so with that comes little like joys as good things. And so we're able to be like super attentive and super personal with the members we do have. And I think just from the responses that I've got is that they really appreciate that. And that means a lot to them. So happy that the Lord showed us that. Sorry, I ramble. This is how I mute myself.
Samantha, I just love it that you just like really expose, because I'm sitting here thinking, no, my inclination, my flesh is wired. You have a headache, take an aspirin, suck it up.
Yeah.
And so I have to fight that.
Why are you complaining?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well,
is this stuff really going to go out to the public? Because,
Do we edit these?
Yeah. No, I love it. I love what you shared. And I think one of the things that is kind of unique about this situation is like we're all, even though we're social distancing and we can't be with each other, I feel like it really is exposing like the realness, like when you're serving out. I think, Liz, that happened to you guys. Was it last Sunday? Something happened with your feed.
Oh yeah, I think it happened to all three of us in the same week, right? It all, like, I don't know if it was an Ohio thing, but they all crashed. So Aaron had to do live. He was at the church building doing it, but with his laptop, and it was all grainy and gross. But yeah, that definitely happened to us too. But he was dressed. He wasn't in his PJs. So.
I know Rick was like at the end, he always shares the gospel at the end. Well, ours just cut off the last 5 minutes. And I said, well, I guess everybody was already saved.
Amen.
So we talked about the gospel earlier. So, oh goodness. Well, I think the last thing I wanted to get some advice, from Cathy and Rivers for sure, is just like how would you advise us to process through those hard days? Because I know we're all talking about, how to be an encouragement to our husband and all that. But I mean, there's just some days, and, I'm not a big crier. Sometimes I'm an emotional stuffer, like to a fault. But I know last week when I was watching the broadcast, they had Pastor Johnny on, and Pastor Johnny is our pastor. You know, we served under him. And, you know, I thought everything was fine. And when he got on there and I saw him and I heard his voice, I started bawling. And I think I didn't even know that, like, you know, that I was like, I really am not okay. I mean, I wanted to hug my computer. I just, like, you know, and it's funny because afterwards my daughter was kind of looking at me. She's like, Mom, you okay? And I said, well, you know, I thought I was, but I guess I'm not okay. But just what would be some advice that you would give us, like how to process through those hard days when we know that our husband and our kids need so much from us, but like we're not doing well? What would you say to that, or how would you speak into that?
Man, such a good question. My first thing, and I've been chewing on this thought for the whole time, basically, so this isn't well formulated, but I'm really learning that lament, the process of taking disappointments, sadnesses to the Lord, and that's the difference in lament and complaint, is that you're going to the Lord versus just whining, you know, and I think we all have, the flesh has a proclivity to just whine, you know, but the difference in lament is that you're going to the Lord. And I often stop myself from going to the Lord because the things I'm feeling sad about aren't that big of a deal. And I think for a lot of us in the Midwest, especially, our cities are somewhat isolated. We all know someone who's had COVID-19 or one person who's died. But we can easily watch the news and recognize it's not the same for us here, you know, that we're not dealing with what New York City, Detroit, you know, New Orleans, some of our harder hit cities. I think Columbus is probably fairly similar to Kansas City, where I am. We know some people, but we feel fairly isolated from some of it. And so I start to feel bad if I'm sad about my trip being canceled, you know. But I really am thankful over the last week. I had a good friend who has experienced a lot of loss in her life, lost 2 of her children, just a lot of loss. And she just looked at me and she said, Rivers, lament is and, not but. Because I kept saying, I'm sad about this, but I know that, you know, we're all healthy. I'm sad that this conference got canceled, or we're not going to be able to celebrate my husband's parents' 50th wedding anniversary, but, you know, I'm just thankful that they're healthy. And she said, Rivers, it's and. You can say and, not but. I'm sad that we're not getting to get together as a family and celebrate my husband's parents' 50th wedding anniversary. And I'm so thankful. And so that small shift for me in the last week has been really significant, that I can just say what I'm sad about or what I'm disappointed in and what I'm thankful for. Because there's typically an and in there. I'm thankful that we're healthy. We have what we need. You know, Dave's parents are healthy. They have what they need. And I'm sad that we're not celebrating them together as a family because we're not traveling. So that's probably a little rambly. Like I said, I've been chewing on that lament thought and trying to help myself get past just shove that down, because it's not that big of a deal, you know. And the Lord says over and over that he wants us to come to him, that he cares about every one of our needs, and we see that, you know, he didn't only perform big miracles. I was recently reading through the Gospels, and his first miracle was wine at a wedding. That's not as big of a deal as leprosy or sight, you know. There's not enough wine at a wedding, but that was his first public miracle. He cares about all of our needs and longs for all of us to come to him. So
she meant to say grape juice, y'all, but we're just going to keep on with it.
I forgot. This is a Southern Baptist.
Yeah. Okay. You know, I would say this too. I think I saw this, that in the Christian community, we don't know what to do with disappointment and grief in general. And that you will have some people who will say people of faith don't do those things. And there's nothing biblically that supports that kind of thinking. I mean, Jesus wept, and he modeled a fully orbed emotional life. Jesus Christ did. And so he had anger. And so our emotions are not meant to be stuffed or denied. And I could see with grief with me, and I had a grief counselor that happened to be a pastor's wife that lost her husband in death. And she would say, grief kind of builds up like a faucet, and that when you expend that out, and she was exactly right. There would be like this dam would kind of break in my heart when I just leaned into that grief, and it was part of the healing process. And so lament is a little different than grief, but pour out my sorrow to God in disappointment, but expend it. And then I felt I was better. And so when people think we don't do this in disappointing times, and it's really sending the wrong signal. It's really, faith doesn't make us have to deny these kind of feelings. We can expend them to the glory of God even. And so be healthy with your emotions, and have a healthy mindset. And, you know, this is why community with your sisters in your city with spouses is a really, really good thing. The understanding of that and to carry each other's burdens is really significant.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great word. And that's one of the things, you know, my son being a senior, he's had a lot of losses and he doesn't really talk about it that much. But last weekend was prom, and, you know, I said, you know, Josh, just because everybody else is going through this doesn't negate how you feel about it, you know, and so it's okay, you know, to express, you know, for my daughter that she had to come home from school, and, you know, all of her end of the year things, and, you know, all those things. And I think sometimes, like you were saying, Rivers, we feel like, well, this isn't like super important and everybody else is dealing with so much more than I am. But
Right.
God really does want to hear how he just wants us to go to him. He's our friend. He wants us to communicate with him about those things. And so this time really is an opportunity for us to just lean in and you know, there's all kinds of spaces in us that God wants to fill. And sometimes when we go through something like this, that's when those are exposed and we know that we need him.
Yeah.
I want to thank you guys for being with us today. My husband's behind me going, wrap it up. But I do want to say, if you are a spouse, a church planner spouse, if you're feeling alone, if you're not connected, at the beginning of this video, all of our information is on the video. So you can go back, you can contact, if you don't have a relationship with the spouse coordinator over your city, or you're just not connected, you know, feel free to reach out to any one of us, because that has been just an incredible blessing to me personally. And I know, you know, to other planners' wives on here, just the support that we get through NAMB and the Send Network, it's been a huge blessing. So next week, when you tune in, the broadcast will not be as pretty as it is this week. But the guys will be back. But I do just want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this week. And our prayer is just that, you know, it will be an encouragement to other wives out there. So tune in next week. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.